Ezra Chiloba thrown out after he was sucked into a multi-million shilling staff mortgage scandal exposed in a board audit, which has also sucked in a secretary to the cabinet, Mercy Wanjau, during her time as CA Acting Director General. The story is on pages 6 and 7. And we do have a picture there of the secretary to the cabinet, Mercy Wanjau. Apparently, she defaulted on an 18 million shilling mortgage for her Lavington Wood Green Terraces home in Nairobi from November last year to March 2023. Also on the front page of the Standard this morning, still paying tribute to the legendary hitmaker Roger Whittaker of the My Land is Kenya fame. Curtain falls on My Land is Kenya icon Roger Whittaker. The story is on page 3 of the Standard this morning. Other stories highlighted on the front page of the Standard. Alarm as July's money supply falls by 419 billion shillings. That's on the business page 17. On the international scene, Russia goes after Wagner Africa Power. On the international pages, page 20. And in sports, champions Manu clash with Bayern. The story is on page 32, and it's an opportunity for us to turn over to the back page of the Standard, much to the pleasure of Stanley Nyaringita.
I love the fact that they mentioned the big name today, the big game today, and not...
Yes, of course, yeah. When Bayern is playing, it is a big team. So yes, Bayern United, Bayern versus Man United. Man United need a helping hand as they face Bayern. That's a headline.
I love the fact that I love the choice of the photo they had there with Lisandro Martinez and giving a helping hand to Marcus Rashford. Goes with the headline.
Yes, and just goes to show how weak this team is and the kind of help it needs. So you can pray for Man United.
Other games, you can be strong, but then you always need a helping hand.
Well, yes. Other games, other fixtures, Champions League fixtures today. Galatasaray versus Copenhagen at 7:45 p.m. Real Madrid versus Union Berlin, 7:45 p.m. Arsenal, the great Arsenal versus PSV Eindhoven at 10 p.m. And also at 10 p.m. Bayern Man United, Benfica Salzburg, Sporting Braga and Napoli, Real Sociedad versus Inter, and Sevilla versus Lens. All those games at 10 p.m. So for fans of the Champions League, you have quite a busy night tonight. Let's move on now to the Daily Nation, Stanley.
Oh yes, now to the Daily Nation. They give you 4 days of hell. Westgate attack 10 years on. And for Lenku, it was a baptism of fire as the Westgate raid made him the good man in the wrong job, quote unquote. So Joseph Ole Lenku, a career hotelier, had been a surprise pick for Interior Cabinet Secretary for newly elected President Uhuru Kenyatta. He was up to the task, he said, and he promised to deliver on his mandate. But the tragic events of September 21st, 2013, that left 67 people dead, will change everything. And when it all started at around midday on that fateful Saturday, the minister had no idea of what was about to happen. More on that is on page 7. Westgate attack 10 years on tomorrow. On the top strip, matters politics, they're asking, Azimio split, Karua Kioni front new political outfit. Sonak Kenya Party leader Martha Karua and Jubilee Party Sec Gen Jeremiah Kioni yesterday fronted a new political movement, lending some credence to possible differences within the opposition. Dubbed Kamwene Leadership Forum, the new formation to champion the interests of Mount Kenya region started gaining traction after Azimio failed to name a member from the populous region to the National Dialogue Committee. More on that is on page 5. On the left strip, other headlines making it to the Daily Nation. My Land is Kenya. Hitmaker Roger Whittaker dies at 87. The death on Monday of famous British folk singer Roger Whittaker has plunged Kenya and the entire world in deep mourning. On page 3, and what is happening in Kenya, intrigues behind Chiloba suspension as Communications Authority boasts an audit of CS mortgage scheme, cites Director General for conflict of interest after applying for and approving his own mortgage, as well as being both buyer and seller in a transaction. Page 5. Really goes on to tell you how all those memes are Sihami Kenya. This is what really happens in this country. On the back page of the Daily Nation, ladies and gentlemen, matters public debt repayment crosses 1 trillion Kenyan shillings mark. The economy's spike in debt stock and repayment blamed on weak shilling, which has added more weight to external debts. They mention a number there, 36%, that is the proportion by which Treasury increased amount of money it spent on repaying debts in the 2022-2023 financial year. And the National Treasury spending on debt repayments rose 306 billion in the year to June. Yes. That is on the Daily Nation this 20th of September.
Okay. Let's take a look at the People Daily. And on the front page of the People Daily this morning, why Chiloba was suspended is a big headline today. On the sport, emerging details now indicate that an internal audit carried out by the Communications Authority established that suspended boss and his predecessor, Mercy Wanjau, currently the cabinet secretary to the cabinet, are culpable in the multi-million shilling mortgage scam. The story is on page 4. And a quote by the PS in the Ministry of ICT says the ministry does not micromanage state corporations. They have their own boards which make decisions. Why Chiloba was suspended. The other story given prominence on the front page of the People Daily this morning, COB, control of budget, brace for tough times ahead. Control of budget Margaret Nyakango warns that weakening shilling, rising public debt will make it hard for government to render basic services. That story is on page 6. And on the top strip of the People Daily today, state steps up exams plan amid El Nino fears. Education PS says measures taken to identify areas prone to flooding to enable NEC prepare for distribution of test materials in time. The story is on page 5. Yeah, and that's the front page of the People Daily this morning.
Right, on the Business Daily, Kenya targets Chinese imports, a new tax evasion crackdown. There is a big story there, and Treasury seeks partnerships to stop undervaluing of products. Multinationals also on radar for transfer pricing. That is on matters trade. In matters diversity, the bottom strip of Business Daily, EABL gives female employees 26-week pregnancy loss leave. Interesting. And on the ticker, hospitality seminars rent cost taxpayers extra 5 billion Kenyan shillings. More insight in there is that on page 4 now, top government officials gobbled an extra 4.99 billion Kenyan shillings on rent, hospitality and seminars in the year ended June compared to the previous period, defying calls to cut the wastage of taxpayer funds and ease pressure on the exchequer. Okay, wow. Munga assets to rather set for auction in new debt row. This is on the companies on page 6. 3 prime properties owned by businessman Peter Munga sent to be auctioned by creditors seeking to recover the unpaid dues, marking the latest debt tussle for the billionaire investor. And on markets, page 14, how increasing interest rates set banks for profit windfall. Commercial banks are sent to gain from the rising interest rate environment as returns from both government securities and private sector leading continue to increase. That is on the Business Daily this morning.
Okay.
On the back page, you can see matters short-time measures in taming fuel prices for the Kenyan consumer. Reminds me of the question that we were asking some time back, how are the Kenyans really coping up with all this?
Okay. Tuangazie gazeti la Taifa Leo asubuhi hii. Habari kuu pale kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo, bodaboda wafikiwa. Mswada ulio mbele wa Seneti utanyoosha sekta hiyo ambayo wahudumu wake hukaidi kanuni na kutowajibika. Masharti makali kwa wahudumu wa pikipiki. La kwanza, watakaobeba zaidi ya abiria mmoja kutozwa faini ya shilingi 20,000 au wafungwe jela kwa miezi 6. Watakaopatikana kwenye njia za kupitia kwa miguu kutozwa 20,000. Watakaoshirikiana kushambulia mtu kufainiwa shilingi 1,100. na masharti mengine mengi pale kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Wahudumu wa bodaboda sasa watatozwa faini kali kwa kukiuka sheria za trafiki au kubeba mizigo kupita kiasi. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa pili wa Taifa Leo. Habari zingine ambazo zimepewa kipaumbele kwenye gazeti hili la Taifa Leo pale juu: mali ya bilionea kupigwa mnada. Mali ya mwanzilishi wa benki ya Equity bilionea Peter Munga itauzwa katika mnada kwa kushindwa kulipa mkopo. Mali hiyo ya Bwana Munga iko kaunti za Murang'a na Meru. Arifa iliyotangaza kuuzwa kwa milki zake mbili ilichapishwa na kampuni ya madalali ya Legacy Auctioneering Services. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa 3. Kwingineko, vidokezo kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo pale chini: wana mazingira watoa tahadhari kuhusu El Nino. Kwingineko, eneo bunge Lamu halijawahi kuona tone la lami. Na kwingineko, ajali ya helikopta yaua KDF. Hizo ndizo habari kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo Jumatano hii.
Let's focus now on the Star. The Star definitely goes with something totally different from other dailies. And the Star is talking about 50 years in jail for gays, lesbians. This is according to a bill. So an anti-gay bill. Law criminalizes change of sex or procedures intended to change gender. So owners of premises where same-sex acts happens to pay 2 million Kenyan shillings or 7 years in jail. More on page 4 and 5. So you can definitely have that there. On the top strip, the Mackenzie I know is a loving family man, says wife Rhoda Maweo, concerning the case of Paul Mackenzie. And on the bottom strip, matters politics. It goes with that is on page 6. More on that will be on page 6. Differing opinion. The big divide. Ruto Raila teams clash on key items. And on public net, Treasury borrowed 9.5 billion Kenyan shillings daily in 3 months. That is according to a report. You can dig into that on page 7. And many areas to receive rain this week. Met forecasts, page 24. So that is a warning. Look for your gumboots and raincoat, because this week it is going to be raining. Cats and dogs.
Okay, cats and dogs indeed. Let's now cross the border to Uganda and a look at the front page of the Daily Monitor this morning. Habari kuu kule Uganda, coup at FDC, it asks. The roller coaster delegates conference called by the party's national chairman, which named a parallel party leadership, could have just paved the way for a protracted fight for the party in and out of court. And they promised to bring you the events leading to the meeting and what lies ahead for the party. And on the front page there of the Daily Monitor, they give the faces of the two gentlemen in the middle of this protracted war for the leadership of the party. That's Patrick Amuriat Oboi, who's the FDC party president, and Erias Lukwago, the interim party president. That's a big headline in Uganda this morning. It's what people are talking about. Other highlights on the front page of the Daily Monitor. I regret joining Parliament, says Segirinya. And government okays 1.4 trillion shillings to fix gap in UPE funding. And this main headline just mirrors what's happening in Kenya with the former ruling party, Jubilee, and the protracted war with regards to leadership of that same party. And something similar happening in Uganda. Tuvuke border sasa tuende Tanzania.
In Tanzania, for the Citizen, World Bank proposes more taxes for the rich. That is a top story there. And it also goes on to say that the World Bank has advised increasing the effective tax rate on large corporations in order to trim the gap between wealthy households and the poor, despite Tanzania's fiscal policy reducing inequality to a greater extent than in most comparable countries. More on that is on page 2. They also quote a number there, 5.1%. In its latest updates, the World Bank says Tanzania's economy will grow by 5.1% in 2023 from 4.6% in 2022. And other stories making it to the Citizen: prioritize books over buildings, Education Minister advises, and 266 billion Tanzanian shillings. Fishing port to change sector's fortunes. So construction of the Kilwa Masoko fishing port is expected to create 30,000 jobs as Tanzania looks to improve performance in deep sea fishing. And finally, here, the life and times of Tanzanian scholar who died with 7 degrees. Right. There's actually another interesting story here. A unique chest surgery performed by the Muhimbili National Hospital. Performing a unique surgery. Groundbreaking, they call it. Surgical procedure using a technique that enables doctors to operate on organs inside the chest through a single incision. That is on The Citizen.
Yes, Mwananchi has an equally busy front page today. And habari kubwa kwenye gazeti la Mwananchi kule Tanzania, fursa nje kwa wavuvi. Utekelezaji mageuzi sekta ya uvuvi. Rais Samia agawa boti 160 kwa wavuvi, azidua ujenzi wa bandari ya uvuvi yenye uwezo wa kupokea meli 10 kwa pamoja. Ulega atangaza ajira mpya 30,000, awaita wawekezaji akinadi fursa za bahari maziwa. Hiyo ndio habari kuu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi. Habari nyingine pale, mchungaji akomba mamilioni ya muumini akidai fungu la 10. Mahakama Kuu ya amuru arejeshe fedha hizo, ikisema hazikutolewa kwa ajili ya fungu la 10 kama alivyojitetea, bali ni mkopo uliostahili kurejeshwa. Pia yamtaka alipe gharama za kesi. Very interesting there. And other stories making it to the front page of Mwananchi. World Bank yamulika sera ya kodi uchumi wa nchi ukipaa. Na kwenye jarida la siasa, Dudula tishio kwa wageni Afrika Kusini. Dudula speaking to the xenophobia that's now a big talking point in South Africa. Alama za vidole kudhibiti wimbi la watumiaji ARV. Wow. Hizo ndizo habari kwenye ukurasa wa mbele Mwananchi leo. Very busy front page. And you actually struggle to tell which is which is a big headline, which is not. At least 2, 3, 4 big stories on the front page. And they look very squeezed. But hayo ni masuala ya Tanzania. Turejee nyumbani sasa tuangalie Karakacha.
Oh yes, even as we're doing that, I can see the Daily Nation, the pullout for my network, speaks on what basically we will be talking today. Matters youth influencing positive change. The change makers, activists, social innovators, disruptors, dreamers and doers like pushing for better quality of life for themselves, those around them and the environment now. Page 6 and 7 is on pull out of my network for Daily Nation. Matters youth and unemployment. Right now to page 12 of The Standard and also page 17 of the Daily Nation. We can start with the Daily Nation this morning. A caricature there of a gentleman looking like now the suspended Ezra Chiloba. He's probably sitting on a seat there, written CEO. 2 houses burning, Communications Authority of Kenya, and also Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. He has been sitting in these 2 houses. He has experience in both houses, and they also have an experience of burning.
Whenever he goes, he leaves the house burning. As a CEO of IEBC, he left it burning. He's now Director General of the Communications Authority of Kenya, and he's been suspended in scandalous fashion as well. Very interesting.
Curious to see which, the third house.
Where next?
Where next?
Should we really ask that question? Where next? Okay, on the Daily Nation, matters Unga revolution, Nairobi, and we have a caricature there, a cartoon of the president addressing the United Nations General Assembly in New York. This is the Standard now, the Standard page 12 of the Standard. We are done with the Daily Nation cartoon. And Unga revolution, Nairobi, and the image of President Ruto there. Try and see the cartoon on People Daily. It's usually on page 10.
Even as you also do that. It's interesting, if whoever even had this, the dark cloud hanging just above him, what it really means. I mean,
Well, it could be making reference to issues of climate change and discussions on climate action, which he is one of the leading figures in that discussion, at least this year alone, after hosting the Africa Climate Summit.
It's even US President Biden loading him for the same.
Exactly. He's been applauded globally for his involvement in that discussion. But I think the cartoon on the People Daily today is the best for me, pays tribute to Roger Whittaker, this great musician. Call him whistling virtuoso. He could whistle a melody from start to finish. And he's done that even in this My Land is Kenya. There's a whole verse towards the end, a whole part where he just whistles the melody. Roger Whittaker, born 1936 here in Kenya, and died this year at the age of 87. And the cartoon on page 10 of the People Daily pays tribute to him. Yes, na hayo ndio masuala ya Karakacha. Remember, our big discussion today is on youth and unemployment, and we'll have in studio Masaki Samuel, Director Youth Affairs, UDA Party, Sarah Kahio, Career Advisor in Emerging Technologies, and Alex Njiri, an education expert. Please get involved in this conversation. You can do that on our social media handles at TV47 News, that's on X, and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. And a quick reminder of our question this morning, because in exactly 1 week's time, that will be next Tuesday, 27th of September, it will be a year since President William Ruto named his cabinet. So today we're asking, in your opinion, which cabinet secretary has performed the best so far and why?
And interestingly, by the way, it's 6:29 a.m. and there are a number of comments on Facebook. This particular time, Jerry Mashari woke up in the morning and told us, Kithure Kindiki, Alan Ale says, Kindiki is the best, the only CS who deserves. Petro, none of the above. Mwangi John, none. Somebody here says, Caster Judy would stop thinking. Mimi to Josiah Atta. Okay. Kindiki na Mwamba. Daktari Hamza says Moses Kuria. Victor Naibei says Kindiki. Omondi Okelo, Kindiki, and Kimani SK says Kindiki. We'll definitely be sampling your feedback.
Yes.
And even as we continue with this, taking a look at your feedback around 9 a.m. And even as we continue during the show, they can definitely call in and give us their views on the same.
And kindly go beyond just naming your best CS. Tell us why you feel that they are the best. The question is, in your opinion, which cabinet secretary has performed the best so far and why? Yes? So do that on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. Time for us now to take a break, but don't go far. That big conversation, youth and unemployment, coming up right after this. You're watching Morning Cafe. Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Ndimuli. Now, that video circulating on social media, including images of thousands of youth who turned out at the Embakasi garrison for military recruitment, where only about 350 slots were available, is a stark reminder of the existing acute levels of unemployment. The distressing incident points a picture of a crisis. Young Kenyans, despite their enthusiasm and aspirations, are confronted with very limited opportunities. And this is what we want to talk about this morning. Youth and unemployment in Kenya. Are we in a crisis? Now, we have in studio Alex Njiri, an education expert. Good morning, Alex. Karibu sana.
Good morning, Fred. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you in studio as well. We're still hoping to have Masaki Samuel, Director, Youth Affairs, UDA Party, and Sarah Kahiu, Career Advisor in Emerging Technologies, joining this panel as we continue. But we'll start with you, Alex. And you look like you are also in that age group between 18 and 35, which is a description of the Kenyan youth.
That's flattering. I'm actually outside.
Are you outside? Oh, okay. I was just, you can take that as a compliment then.
Indeed, indeed.
But watching that, the kind of chaos, the kind of almost a stampede, because we usually talk about idle youth when we talk about political rallies and their availability to attend such
right,
short
yeah.
notice. But when you see thousands of Kenyan youth going to seek employment in that kind of a manner, and it's almost a stampede, what kind of feeling did you get?
Right, it's heartbreaking for me, and once again, thanks, Fred, for having me on set this morning. Good morning, viewers. Right, so it's heartbreaking, and I think for me as a parent, and I would imagine hundreds of thousands of other parents, millions potentially, they must have had their hearts broken yesterday at the sight, of the stampede. I think it was really, really disheartening for a lot of people with students in colleges and universities, and looking at that, scene and asking themselves, is it worth it? Mm-hmm. And of course, this comes in the background of, what has been happening in the public education sector, especially tertiary education, and the cost of studying at, university and in college. And that cost, of course, has come. You can forget about the frameworks of funding and the models. That's a conversation for another day. But it's become more expensive now to have a student in college. Mm-hmm. Then you look at that picture and you ask yourself, is it worth it? Mm-hmm. Because what that picture tells me is that this is a ticking time bomb. We have unemployment. We've long known that we're grappling with a big problem of youth unemployment. That Kenyan corporate, organizations, the government, of course, being a big employer, and also the MSMEs have not been able to absorb graduates at the level, at the manner in which, we're churning them. Mm-hmm. I think we are churning about 200K graduates every year, mm-hmm. give or take. Okay. But we cannot absorb them all. In fact, I was reading a report which was, saying we are only able to absorb about a seventh of what we're churning, about 40,000 of them. Okay. So where do the others go? What kind of programs have been put in place to ensure that these guys don't get lost, in the entire employment ecosystem, Jua Kali sector,
For the longest time, some of this has been blamed on the kind of education that we have, that probably the system has appeared to lead more on theoretical courses, right, as opposed to practical skills that are needed in the economy or in the job market. But the curious thing is that of these thousands of people who turned up there, most of them were fresh graduates from the National Youth Service, where right, yeah, proper skills are actually impacted on this group. How come these people are finding themselves in a state of desperation, whereas they should be able, or they should have already acquired skills that are needed in this market?
In fact, I think, Fred, you've diagnosed the problem. We have, for a very long time in this country, put a lot of credence to prestigious, courses and degree programs, right? Growing up, and I think we pretty much grew up at around the same time, there was a lot of emphasis on law, on medicine, on engineering, perhaps. You remember in the early noughties, in the early 2000s, you had a course called Actuarial Science that became the buzz of town. Everyone was doing it. A program called IMES, you know. So we have this flock mentality as Kenyans, right? And it's something that is cultural. It's not just, you know, restricted to the education sector. That's why you would have the Quail. You remember the Quail?
Yes.
We had the Quail fad. You know, we've had the crypto fad at some point. We had the fad of these guys who are carrying blue banners written, "You should be here," you know, traveling. So we tend to move as a flock. So the end result of all these was that the vocational courses, what you're referring to as skills-based courses, your plumbing, your artisan guys, your mechanic, these are courses that are highly marketable, right? Even in Europe, if you go to Europe right now, the jobs that are paying very well, that are highly marketable, are those vocational, you know, jobs that require on-the-job skills. Now, they are not prestigious, you know, and so a lot of Kenyan parents, I must blame parents here, have, you know, tended to move their kids away from, you know, from those programs or those courses. And the end result now is you can find a decent plumber. And when you have a decent plumber, they are overbooked. I mean, they are not able to satisfy the demand for their services. You can find a decent mechanic. When you find a decent one, who's probably gone and been trained by one of the big franchises of the Japanese or, you know, European car makers, they are again not available. So how about if we moved, as a matter of policy, to encourage our youth to take up more vocational, you know, jobs that require vocational skills, as opposed to your traditional.
The concern, therefore, is because these were fresh graduates from the NYS,
right,
seeking military employment. Now, if you go through the NYS, that is where they teach a lot of these things.
Correct.
It's equivalent to a TVET institution.
Yes.
So issues like plumbing, mechanical engineering to whatever level, electrical engineering.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then how come, if at all we are saying those are the marketable courses,
right,
how come we are seeing a sense of desperation in the same people who've been to NYS and already have the skills?
I think, again, two things. And I think I addressed the first thing earlier. When I said, again, these courses are not very, they're not prestigious, all right? So this guy goes to NYS because they think that if they go there, this is a stepping stone to them getting into, for example, the forces, security forces, which is a prestigious job in this country. So they learn carpentry, for example, but they want to use it as a stepping stone to gain
They don't want to become a carpenter.
Yeah, they don't want to become a carpenter. But also the next thing is a lot of those programs, for you to become self-employed, need a form of capital, right? So if you're going to be a carpenter, because no one knows you're a carpenter, Fred has just graduated. So for you to, you know, perhaps start off, you need to open a workshop somewhere with basic carpentry tools, right? And that's going to set you back anywhere between, I don't know, maybe 30K, 100K. I'm not an expert in that. But that's capital. And a lot of these kids just don't have that kind of money. And when you add rent and everything, yeah, and the fact that to sustain a business in Kenya today, you need to be able to run it from your pocket for the first 6 months before it becomes, you start breaking even and sustaining it. Do these kids have that kind of money to start those small workshops? It also speaks to the policy, government policy. So if that guy goes and opens a workshop, the following morning, he'll have guys from the county government come and ask, where's your license, right? Then he'll have guys, the same guys will ask for his fire certificate or fire licensing certificate. KRA, and I see now they have recruited some, foot soldiers, will be there telling him to register for VAT and asking for 1% of his daily, sales in a turnover tax. So there are a lot of obstacles placed in these guys' path, that the mere thought of them opening even a small workshop to practice their trade is unthinkable. They just can't afford it.
And you started by talking about the issue of what I may call disillusionment in the university system.
Correct, yeah.
And people appearing not really keen to pursue university education at this point. And the government, this particular administration, appears keen on directing this youth in a different direction towards vocational training,
right,
TVETs. But if at all the feeling is that even if I get skills training in a TVET, I'm still looking for what I would call a prestigious job.
Yeah.
Isn't it a defeatist attitude that even if we push the youth towards a vocational training, it will still not be beneficial to them?
I think, Fred, that's a question of mindset. It's a question of the cultural impetus, what we have as a culture, as a country. And remember, we're a very young country, barely 100 years old, as a country. Yeah, we just, I think, about 100 and a few years old. That problem that you allude to was a problem that bedeviled bigger economies like India, where in the 80s and 90s they churned out so many engineers and doctors that there's a joke that in India, if you threw a stone, every chance it would hit a doctor, right? And that's why, I suppose, why they've become experts in medical tourism now. And of course, they started addressing that in the early 2000s, and they moved more towards vocational. Because again, India, of course, now today is the most populous country in the world. They just overtook China earlier this year. And of course, with that comes massive unemployment, because you have so many guys that need to get on the job market. You're not able to absorb them, all. So they've had to go to vocational courses. They've gone to skills. India today is one of the biggest manufacturers of vehicles, right? Vehicles are assembled there. The tuk-tuks, your three-wheeled, borders, they also manufacture a lot of them. Industrial tools, they're huge. And that was a result of the policies that the government adopted to push more of the Indian youth graduating towards vocational skills as opposed to your traditional academic or theoretical courses and programs. And it's something that China has also done. But on top of that, government can also do, from a policy perspective, a lot of good things. For example, in China now, what the government is doing to encourage corporate and SME organizations to employ fresh graduates is giving them incentives. So if you, for example, employ a fresh graduate, the government gives you something we call tax rebates, right? And they also give you money to pay that graduate for 1 year. So essentially, if you're a business, the government is giving you free labor for 1 year. And if you're a smart guy and you have free labor for 1 year, from the second year, you'll not ask government to help you. You'll have been able to create enough value for you to be able to employ them and keep them in employment, but now with you paying the salaries as opposed to government coming to subsidize that.
Is that the gap that we are seeing in our situation here in Kenya? Because we're very quick to criticize the government. They've not done this, they've not done the other.
Right.
But from what I'm hearing from you is that probably the problem is inherent in the youth themselves, that even their mindset, their thinking, their approach to life is a bit off, that even if the government whatever government intervention comes in may not really be of help to them because their thinking is in a different direction.
Right, Fred. Now, we are told that about 2.7 million Kenyans are unemployed. And if you were to add what you call non-gainful employment, so it's those guys who are employed, but they probably have to subsidize their salary from pocket money from their folks, for example, from their parents, or maybe doing other things apart from that employment, what you call side hustles. So if you put that, group, add them together, you look at about 6-7 million Kenyans who are not employed or in gainful employment. That's the diagnosis. You're not going to have one symptom. So what you've described is one symptom. There is the question of how the graduates or the young guys perceive the programs they're being encouraged to do. But there's a problem of policy that I alluded to earlier. For example, we're being told that this administration would create 1 million jobs a year. There was even a pledge to create 4 million jobs in the last 1 year. Now, had they created 4 million jobs from when they took over power, which was, 1 year ago, 4 million jobs, you and I would be feeling it. You would see it in the economy.
Yes.
The economy would be buzzing. So there's every indication that milestone has not only been met, I don't think they've come anywhere close to meeting it.
Okay.
So that's symptom number 2. The third one is also the cultural symptom that I've alluded to earlier. How the parents perceive these programs. Because parents play a critical role in how their children, in what kind of programs they end up at. Because more often than not, it's the parents financing it, it's the parents providing mentorship. So that's the third one. But the fourth one as well, that I had not discussed earlier is also the role of industry as well, and the role of our education institutions as well. So, for example, we saw some degrees being scrapped, and that has happened every year, because a lot of these programs are not well thought out, okay? So a lot of these programs are brought in because either they're being taught somewhere else in the world, or because they make good money. You'll know that not every degree program, their profit margins are not the same. So if you have, for example, science programs are very difficult, very expensive, to execute, because you need laboratories, you need agents, you need
also
cultures
difficult.
in labs.
Not everyone would opt for
Correct.
science.
Yes, all right. Whereas humanities, ordinarily cost much less, because all you need is a lecturer that can, teach theory and all that. So again, universities have also, let us down in that respect, giving us courses and admitting a lot of students to programs, for example, that will never have a stand a chance of absorbing all the graduates.
Okay,
Yeah.
and because we're due for a break in about 5 minutes or so, let's give a chance to the other member of this panel, Sarah Kahiu, career advisor in emerging technologies, and we were in school together, I remember.
Yes, we are.
It's good to have you in studio. Karibu sana.
Yes,
and you just found Alex trying to explain, because we started by looking at the scenes witnessed at Mbakasi 2 days ago, where thousands of Kenyan youth, and according to reports, there were fresh graduates from the NYS. They were coming from seeking military recruitment. Over 7,000 of them, where the slots were only about 350. Yeah. And the question is, where is the disconnect? Because it would appear that everyone is telling Kenyan youth that forget about these theoretical courses. Go for skills, plumbing, electrician, craftsmen, and stuff like that, because that is what the market needs. These people have been through NYS.
Yes.
That is the kind of training they've gained.
Yes.
How come they appear so desperate, yet if they've been told that if you gain this kind of knowledge, this is what will help you?
So first of all, when I saw that, because these are people who have gone paramilitary training, right?
Yes.
So these are no ordinary graduates. So first of all, when government is having such programs, we need to reverse engineer from the job market. So what does the job market need? Then reverse engineer and offer the courses accordingly. Then again, you realize people are taught the skills, but they are not taught the skill of seeking work. For example, most jobs right now, if you are applying, the first screening is done by artificial intelligence. So if you're not catering to that, if what you have written in your application is not, is not being recognized by what is fed in the AI, in the artificial intelligence, then unaanguka tu.
Wow.
So what I know is that we have to change everything, especially in the light of artificial intelligence, in the face of all these new technologies. We have to change our approach in everything, in the way we are offering jobs. Even all these, it doesn't matter how technical your job is, you have to integrate technology. You have to find a way of digitizing what you're doing. For example, a plumber, at some point, a plumber will use a robot. Unarusha robot kwa pipe, inaenda inapiga round, it shows you what is going on in there, and then it gives you the information,
Do you think that's a gap because NYS has been touted as perhaps one of the best inventions that help Kenyan youth advance or transition to the job market.
Yes.
That previously, even before you joined university, you had to have a stint at the NYS. And even now, the proposal is to still have some form of that NYS bit before you join university or immediately after, before you join the job market. Do you see a technology gap in the kind of training that NYS has?
I see it, and I see it even in the TVET, even in the universities. They are not integrating. For example, some of these artificial intelligence and all these data analysis, those basic things, they should be part of common courses. Truly, they should. And I proposed that to with Dr. Fred in University of Nairobi, I know they are reconstituting their common courses, and I suggested that we cannot have the same old common courses. They have to have common courses that have to have digital literacy.
Okay.
Now, it's not even hiyo maneno ya sijui packages. We are no longer there. We are really, really going ahead, and we have to integrate it. Because if we don't, our people are being left behind. In 2014, I was in US, and I saw kids in kindergarten learning what we are learning right now. Kindergarten, they were coding. Those are the people now you see they are inventing this ChatGPT and the rest.
Oh, wow.
Because they were taught from the ground up, and that is how we have to do it.
Okay.
We can't afford to regurgitate what we were doing in the last century. Yes.
Alex, very briefly as we wrap this session
Right.
before the break, there seems to be an assumption even in anyone, with anyone going to NYS, that the next natural progression is them joining the military. That was never the intention, was it?
No, it never was. I think it was lost in translation, because the intention was to build resilience. Of course, first is to, basically orient them to a working environment, but also build resilience. And it also bought time for people to reconsider their university choices. So once you're exposed to 2, 3, 4 skill sets, and then you are allowed to change your program, at the end of your tenure at the NYS. Because, for example, you're chosen to do law. Then you realize actually you have very good strength in the sciences. Then it gives you an opportunity to move from law and go do biochem, do medicine if you're qualified, or whatever, or vice versa. So I think it was a very important program. It also built resilience, because if there's a criticism of Gen Z, and I think you will agree with me as well, is that they are not resilient. I happen to, because I work for a business school, I happen to interact a lot with recruiters. And one of the biggest complaints is about the lack of resilience in the younger guys, the younger folks. They will not hold a job for long if they think, their conditions are not perfect there, all right? They're not being treated very softly. There is no tea at 10 and snacks at 4 and all those things. Yes, and guys, older folks like you and I would understand. We've probably worked in organizations that had extremities in terms of probably how you're treated, how you're inducted, because that's an important, it's an integral part of how you perceive your employer. But we're able to be resilient and survive it all. So the NYS played that critical role. But the first role, that of guys trying to find their true calling, was the most critical role. Of course, like I said, there was this presumption amongst the participants that if you went to NYS, then you're always going to end up at the NPS or the KDF, which of course was never the intention in the first place.
I think that's a good time for us to take a break. When we come back, we'll look at, we'll continue with this discussion on youth and unemployment. I'm in studio with Alex Njiri, education expert, and you, career advisor in emerging technologies. Get involved in this conversation as well. You can do that on our social media pages, on X, TV47 News, and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. What do you think about youth and unemployment? That after the break. You're watching Morning Cafe. On TV47 with me, Fred Ndimuli, we continue this conversation on youth and unemployment. And we're in studio with Sarah Kahio, career advisor in emerging technologies, and Alex Njiri, education expert. Now, let me just look at some of the statistics, and this is based on a survey by the East Africa Institute, the Kenya Youth Survey Report of 2016. And it says Kenya is a very youthful country. The median age is estimated at 19 years, and about 80% of Kenya's population is below 35. 80%. Probably that's why the rate of unemployment is that huge and affecting mostly the younger people or the younger population. To a very large extent, Kenyan youth defined as individuals between the ages of 18 and 35. Now we're basing our discussion on that, it's just a background on what the scenes we saw at Embakasi Garrison 2 days ago, when more than 7,000 youth showed up for recruitment to the military, where only about 300 slots were available. And just before the break, we were looking at what NYS is doing. Now I want to move forward and probably even look at the education system because you are an education expert and you understand the role of education in employment. We are coming from, not really coming from, we're still trying to implement the CBC. Which is more focused on, they call it pathways, that you identify a certain pathway, be it in arts, be it science-based, and you start that early enough. Yet that was probably the same thing that 844, which we, hopefully all the three of us went through. Do you think that that could remedy this situation? Probably that at the end of CBC, anyone who has gone through CBC will be better placed for the job market. Let's start with you, Sarah.
Yeah, I do, because I remember for us, the 844 people, what was it called? The one for agriculture, 4K Club.
Yes.
Yes, we came all the way from there. And literally right now, I'm a hydroponics expert, so that is the original, that is where it started. Yes. And I can tell you, because of the rigorousness of 844, you realize you know some things. For example, you know how to fix things. Do you know there are kids now who don't know how to fix their clothes, like basic sewing, or you know joints. You can shika a hammer and and make a dovetail joint.
We did full pajamas in primary school.
Yeah. So basically, I think it's a very good thing. If only people would embrace it as it should. But also, it needs to be integrated in such a way that people will find themselves in it. Because right now it feels like it's being force-fed. And parents right now are very, 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 you can see the resentment because of all the things they are forced to do. So if the government can find a way of substituting some of those things, because it is becoming very, very expensive. And as you can see, the way the economy is, so you can tell there's some kind of resentment. Yeah. But speaking of that, I can tell you, personally, I studied botany and biochemistry in University of Nairobi. And I knew, for me, I was very adamant that that is what I was going to study. I had to study BSc because I knew in high school, I identified that I love botany. I mean, biology and chemistry, those were my best. And right now, when I'm advising people, I usually ask them, what was your best subject in high school or in college? Because from there, you are able to advise them on the career trajectory they will take. Yes.
Yet there appears to be a disconnect in matters education, that the ideas, even at policy level, are very brilliant. And even 844, when it started, I think even towards the end, it was a bit more diluted. When we started, and we were not by any standard the very first for 844, we came right at the middle. We even did music and agriculture and all these things that were very practical. But towards the end of 844, it had become purely theoretical. We are seeing CBC. The ideas are very good, very forward-looking. But even in the implementation, is that it looks like they're already diluting it, even at the initial stage.
Right. Fred, Kenya, we have a big problem of implementation. Yeah. When it comes to policy, we have some of the best policies in Africa, from within the education sector. We have some of the best, some of the most robust policies within the education sector. But when it comes to implementation, I think that's where we draw the line. First, we lack discipline as a country, and I think I've been a big, I've been a big voice on that. We lack discipline as a country, we are not disciplined. That's why every morning when you're driving to work, you have guys overlapping on your left and your right without regard for the oncoming
Kiambu Road is very bad
and
with
the pedestrians, right? So when you queue, there are guys who are going to jump the line, either because they are bigger than you or because they know someone, at the counter. So we lack discipline as a country, and that's a whole different conversation. But, going back to your earlier question on CBC, CBC is a godsend for this country. When you look at the challenges we're facing now with youth unemployment, you want to go CBC because one, it's competence-based, all right? So we're moving from theory to competence, to skills, to vocation. Again, brilliant, on paper, brilliant in terms of the policy framework. Question is, how will we fare long-term, mid and long-term in implementation? Because if you look at CBC, it's modeled around where the world is going. You look at American Christian education, same underpinning. You look at IGCSE, which a lot of the more affluent Kenyans take their kids to, it's the same underpinning as CBC. Because one of the problems with our generation, I will say this, Fred, because during the break I discovered we're in university together. Our generation has outsourced the problem of molding their children's character to the teachers, and then the problem of doing their assignments to their house helps or house managers for that respect. And it's a hallmark of middle class, especially middle class Nairobians. Now, the thing is, your child, whoever you allow to do that stuff with them becomes your mentor, all right? So mentorship is not a switch that you switch on and off, switch it off and then switch it on when you get home, all right? It's the culmination of all those experiences for the kids. So from school to home. So a lot of us are not good mentors to our children, all right? So we have to start there as parents. You need to mentor your kids from a very early age on. And the CBC, it also allows kids with perhaps a challenged, academic, I don't know how to phrase this, but kids who are not very brilliant academically, but have other skills. It gives them a break, because the 844 at some point had become a referendum on who can cram more than the other, Yes. Now with CBC, you give an opportunity to that kid who is very good in music, for example, but doesn't excel in the academics, who is very good in football, right? Who is very good at practical things, making the pajamas you alluded to. I don't remember making pajamas, but maybe it's because I was in a boarding school.
Yes.
Right. And doing all those things, making bean bags, that I remember doing, and all that stuff. You give them a break, and you allow them to feel important, regardless of their academic, prowess. Because when you focus too much on the academic, and you celebrate all the guys who achieved, and there's nothing wrong with achieving academically, but you hoist the kids up in the air and make all the hullabaloo. What does that, do to the kids who perhaps did not excel, but make it, later in life? And that's why you see, for example, there's a joke that goes on in this town, that the C students are the ones who employ the A and B students, right? Yes, because those C students at some point feel so bad. If they ever make it, they will never let you hear the end of it, because of how they were made to feel. Kenyan kids need to know that it is okay, even if you're not brilliant or outstanding academically, you can excel at other things, because that then becomes the underpinning for you to tell that kid you can make a great carpenter. You can make a great welder. You can make a great artisan. And you'd be shocked. There's some welders in this town making more than the three of us on this table combined. Because they are very good at what they do. They've excelled at it, and they've professionalized it. So it doesn't, failing in the academics, failing in the national examinations does not sound a death knell, for the Kenyan students.
And still on matters education and the role it plays in preparing this population for unemployment, whatever kind of employment that will be. I'll go back to the Kenya Youth Survey report of 2016 by the East Africa Institute. And it also found that very few want to become farmers, 11% of the youth. For an economy that boasts or that depends on agriculture as its backbone, as its mainstay. The fact that agriculture is not a compulsory subject, as it is, it's actually an optional subject in Kenya today. Don't you think that's where the disconnect starts? That an economy that is solely or majorly based on agriculture, then a lot of the Kenyan youth should be looking towards agriculture.
Yes. I remember a youth saying agriculture is not sexy enough, and we need to bring it to that level. And I would say, because I am a hydroponics expert, it is a tech, it is like the futuristic way of doing agriculture. And I would say that if I was a youth, if I was in my 20s, I'm in my 40s right now, but if I was in my 20s, I would do agriculture. I would look at farming. And not just that, see how I can integrate. Right now I'm working on 2 agricultural products, probably and hopefully to make it sexy enough for them, but I'm working on 2.
Do you think it will? Because only 11% are interested in that kind of careers in agriculture.
I will try to polish it for them, whether they do it or not, but I'm working on 2 products, 2 startups. Hopefully, by the end of the year, we'll see where that goes.
Sarah, you must make it flexible, okay? They can work from wherever.
Yeah. Oh yes, that one, especially that, because yes, and it's bougie, and you can, you can work from where. You can have your garden on top of the rooftop,
But
with a view.
Oh yeah.
where is the disconnect? Is it in the system? Because even the CBC still does not make agriculture a compulsory subject. Yet we're still saying we are dependent. This economy is dependent on agriculture. How will we bridge that gap? Because leaving it to choice, that only those who are interested in this, from the onset, it doesn't look very attractive.
Yeah.
If we're going to wait for the 2 startups that Sarah is going to come up with for us to make Kenyan youth interested in agriculture, where are we heading?
Yeah, it is very sad. The priorities of this country need to be relooked at. I try not to get into politics. By the way, I ran for a political seat in 2013.
We cannot avoid politics on this panel.
I ran for a political seat in 2013, and it was because of this. And I keep saying science and technology is the last frontier for employment creation. So, and as a country, we have, the problem is, even the farmers who are doing the farming, is because why has the sugar economy failed? Why has the maize economy failed? And yet tunakula ugali kila siku, tunakunywa chai kila siku. Why? So the prioritization of the government, the incentivization, the government has to incentivize it. It has to prioritize it, because we cannot keep. How are we importing maize? How are we importing maize? How are we importing sugar? Why are we?
And getting fed by a war-torn country,
Ukraine.
We're depending on Ukraine.
Hebu hizo kilomita ni ngapi kutoka huko kwote surely?
Surely. There's milk technology, coffee sector, tea technology, all this, yet Kenyan youth are not at least interested in that. Don't you think that that's where the problem is? That, and we go back to that issue of mindset, that we are facing acute unemployment because everyone wants what you called clean, prestigious jobs. And we've already assumed that we already assumed that agriculture is not as prestigious.
Right, yeah. So I think 2 things. First is, if there's anything we've discovered about the Kenyan youth, is that they have a propensity for going for anything that makes money. Yes. So we've got to make those sectors gainful employers. We've got to make them, rich, money channels. We've got to have industrial parks whose, sole remit is exports. So you remember when we were growing up, horticulture was huge in this country. I think that's when there was a French bean revolution in this country. I think the cut flower business was at its peak. We need to reestablish our dominance as an exporter of fresh roses, for example, as an exporter of green, fresh stuff. Take it to the Middle East, to Europe and all that. Look for new frontiers. China, India, they cannot feed themselves. Look for export opportunities. Because the export also cushions our Kenyan shilling, which is under barrage at the moment. The next thing is you also need to start implementing, find ways of implementing those policies. Like I said, we are policy rich. We have very good policies, but how do we implement them? If you look at the implementation framework, by the way, Kenyans are very good writers. They are brilliant at presentation. Our president right now is the darling of the world because of his presentation skills. He goes there and dazzles the world. But ground?
Nobody different.
Yes, that's the point. That it actually, our president is a very good example of that. Very big in talking, okay? Poor in implementation. So it has to go back to that. That if our president like that, he's a more, we are the ones who elected him. So that's a Kenyan mindset. He's not the only one who is guilty. It's every Kenyan. So we've got to find a way of always walking our talk. Then in finishing the last point, and I think this has not been explored enough, there's now a huge opportunity from the agricultural lens. There's a whole new conversation about climate and climate change that culminated, of course, in the resolutions at the ACS recently ended. The president is making some very absolutely brilliant presentations, at the UNGA. A friend of mine was asking me whether UNGA means he'll come back with UNGA, literally. Now, if you follow through and you give people incentives to plant trees, right, for example, and earn carbon credits, which they can then sell on the carbon exchange, you're getting money literally for nothing.
Interestingly, and go back to that conversation about education and the role it plays,
right.
Because the Kenya Kwanza administration had the manifesto had 6 pillars. Agriculture was one of them.
Yes.
Environment and climate change is another pillar. MSMEs, healthcare, and all those. But between agriculture and between agriculture and environment and climate change, those two things have still not been mainstreamed in the education system, especially now that you mentioned climate change. It is yet to be mainstreamed in our education system.
Right.
It means there's a gap already. That the knowledge gap that exists about, you remember, the kind of discussions people are having about climate change, including senior members, elected members of parliament, really not understanding what exactly that is. Mainstreaming this kind of knowledge into a curriculum.
That's true, Fred. But to be fair to the task force that the president set up, and I think it gave its recommendations a couple of months back, a few months ago, I think, the task force identified and recommended the teaching of sustainability, as a common course. I think when we went to university, there were those common courses, communication skills, or business communication, depending on the program you did. I think there was IT or some iteration of it. Sustainability is a big, and sustainability speaks also to climate change and all that. If that was mainstreamed, it then means that at the onset of your formal tertiary education, every Kenyan kid is given an opportunity to see the kind of leverage they can gain from agriculture. The financial leverage they can gain by planting trees, for example. Trees are going to be big. I listened to a presentation by an expert in carbon credits and what they call REDD+, and the national NCBAPs. And that expert, when I left the hall where they were delivering the lecture, I started calling back the village and asking, how much are trees? Seedlings, how much are they? And, I called my neighbor, can you lease me about 2-3 acres, for 10 years or so? Because I was inspired, right? And I know a few of my friends who have invested in trees, who have listened, and the intention was to cut the trees at maturity. But now, with carbon credits, all right, and the opportunity around, the entire climate conversation, they said, hang on, it doesn't make sense to, log, It makes sense to maintain that tree and then sell the carbon credits that you get as a result of having a forest or having so many trees over, a square kilometer or a square yard. So that can be monetized. Now, like I said, if there's something our youth have, it's that propensity for making money. Because if you look at, and I'm not a big fan, I'll be honest, Sarah, but once in a while, I go to TikTok because it helps me understand what the conversations are.
Yes.
And I marvel at what I see. Guys with words of cash, and very young guys who don't look like they've earned that money. And those are the role models. Those are your sons and daughters role models.
Yes.
They want to be like those guys who have words of cash on the table and saying you'll only live once and things to that effect. And those are the guys they look up to. And that guy probably doesn't. He wakes up at 11 a.m., right? And probably goes to somewhere to enjoy the rest of the day. He has no formal work that you can talk of. He has no formal skills that you can point to. He has no known office, has no known shop where you can say that is where they get their money, but has a lot of money.
And those
are the role models.
This same report that I'm getting a lot of data from had a mention of that, the integrity. That out of this huge population of the youth in Kenya, this is purely for the youth. 50% believe it doesn't matter how one makes money. Yeah? As long as one does not end up in jail. 47% admire those who make money through hook or crook, including hustling. 30% believe corruption is profitable. 73% are afraid to stand up for what is right for fear of retribution. And only 40% believe that it is important to pay taxes. Because the issue of quick money, and that's where we are right now. Yeah. That even some of those people who've pursued knowledge or courses in IT, and we've heard about what's happening in Mulot, that they choose to use that knowledge in ways that are not necessarily the correct ways. Yes. Hacking, defrauding bank systems and the like. This is knowledge that they already have and could be used in a positive way, but the integrity of our youth is also wanting. Are we saying that that is part of the bigger issue, that even with knowledge, your integrity will determine what kind of job you get? Yes.
I have noticed that, and even in TikTok, we have been having debates on the things that are happening past midnight, and that's scary. It's actually very scary when I look at it. And I don't know why that, because some of people of our generation, I don't think we would do some of these things. I don't know.
We would not even dare.
I don't know what missed. I don't know whether it's because we went to Sunday school or madrasas, and these days, you know, atheism is a thing. But there is a disconnect, because that sense, I mean, your conscience should tell you that what you're doing is wrong, you know, and you know, and it's not just in tech, because that is a reflection of who you are fundamentally. But for those who utilize these social medias, I do know someone who have grown their business from scratch just with an Instagram shop. You know, they take photos of their product, they set it up, and they sell, you know, and they make their 5K every day. Mtumba, you know. I know people who teach something on TikTok and they leave their, or just share those funny memes, and they leave their M-Pesa till there, and if you do something that makes me laugh, I will dungia you 100 bob, you know. I have seen people who have monetized it, you know, with integrity, but I've also seen the other side, and the other side is making me worried, because I'm wondering, what are we going to do? Because and yet, and then again, that is a reflection of who we are as a country. Because as in, when we look at our leaders and we look at ourselves, that is an extrapolation of who we are. Yes. So the question is how are we going to, you know, to stop it? Because
the feeling is that this population of the Kenyan youth is escaping blame in this issue of youth unemployment, that we are ready to blame the education system, government policies, politicians, parents, everyone else, including house managers. But the youth seem to be getting away with it. They themselves, to some extent, are to blame because of the choices. You said initially, resilience. And probably it plays into this, that none of them is willing to do this anything for the long term, that they are out for quick money, and that does not last for long.
Fred, you're not going to have one solution to a 7 million problem. 7 million, not employed, not in gainful employment. It's not one prognosis. It's a combination of all those. The youth are to blame. Of course they are. Yeah, their lack of resilience, and that's pretty acknowledged, by everyone in our generation. Maybe when they are our age and they're able to introspect, they will also come to a realization that perhaps they could have done more. But even parents are to blame, In fact, I sat here listening to Sarah, and I couldn't fail to see the irony, because these guys are actually a mirror image of us. Only that their weaknesses are manifested in different ways to ours, right? Our generation was, and when I say our generation, I mean anyone 55 and below, and between 35 and 55. We were the first generation in this country to mainstream corruption, right? So I would say probably 60 to 35, 40 to mainstream corruption. The generation before that might have been corrupt, but they hid it. Because back then, society seethed at the thought that you could make money through corruption. You became a pariah. You would probably not even find a seat in church. No one would want to sit next to you. You would not find anyone willing to give you a mic at the podium to address worshippers on Sunday. But this generation, the current one, our generation of adults, is the one that has mainstreamed corruption. I mean, it doesn't matter how you make money, as long as you're wealthy, you get to sit at the front of the church. All right? Do you think Timothy Njoya would have allowed the current set of politicians to speak in church on Sunday? Do you think Manasseh Kuria would have allowed that? Ndigi Monanzeki? Do you think they would have allowed that? Cardinal Otunga? Would they have allowed the current crop of political leaders, especially those that are known to be kleptomaniacs, to address, church on Sunday? They would not have. And that erosion has happened for the entire ecosystem of the society, from the religious leaders who, by the basic underpinning, are our moral yardsticks, to our political leaders. Of course, they are the biggest perpetrators, to the civil service, to corporates, to the Juakali sector, to the general populace, to our youth. So that erosion has happened progressively through. Now, our generation has perfected corruption. Now, I was going to ask you, because I would make the presumption that we are all either parents or guardians here, that if you're carrying your child or someone that would be considered your child that you're mentoring, and you overlap, what does that communicate to them? Do you then have the moral authority to tell them that what you're doing is wrong? If they're engaged in any vice at some point, you give a bribe to a cop. So you're carrying them, you're probably going somewhere away, you're going to your village, you get stopped by a cop, and then you give him, and then you come into the car and loudly exclaim how you were able to negotiate the cop downwards from 2K to 500, or from 5,000 to 1,000. Very proud of yourself. What are you communicating? So whereas we might want to point at the youth, this problem has not started with them. It started with perhaps the generation of our parents, but then became progressive. It's like a pyramid. So as we've gone down the years, it's like going down a pyramid. So it becomes wider. Corruption becomes more. It's mainstreamed, right? Ethical considerations are cast aside. Ethics is no longer important. It's not important. And that's a reflection of our society. We've got to have a wake-up moment as a society where we say, we want to draw a line, right? This is where you can go. In this zone, this is an orange zone, we can discuss. Beyond that is a red zone. This is off the table, it's off the menu. If we have that, all right, and the youth see that kind of discipline in us, they'll be able to emulate that. They'll be able to have us mentor them, and they also have red lines in their lives. As it were right now, they don't.
And probably one of the direct results from that kind of attitude is the fact that the youth in Kenya now are no longer seeing the importance of education or the need to pursue education to higher levels. Case in point, when Cooks, the equivalent of JAB, was doing placement to universities recently, I think last month, out of the over 800,000 who qualified for placement to universities and other tertiary institutions, only about 280,000 applied. For universities, about 23,000 people who qualified for placement in universities did not even bother applying. That speaks to some, because it speaks to a great extent on the kind of youth population ready for the job market in the next 4 years, that most of them will not have attained the university degree. We're coming from a generation where, especially after Mwai Kibaki came into power, then university education became the order of the day. Everyone was getting a degree. Now you're seeing a group where fewer and fewer university graduates will be available for the job market. Is it disillusionment? Is it the fact that they see once you go through university, you'll not necessarily get a job?
Yeah, so there are several factors to that. One is that disillusionment. I actually helped so many, I think over 1,000, to just apply, to just get to the website, the KUPS website, and apply, you know, for the university and for the TVETs. You know, there are those who entered, but there are those ones who are like, ikitu. Especially now when then the fees were, they were looking at the fees, and they kept asking me, what is the alternative? Literally, and that is, and we are working with, I work with you know, several organizations, and we are looking at what are the short courses. So tuseme hawataenda uni for real. So what? And yet we shall need them to work at some point. So we are looking at those free courses, online courses. The thing is, wanasoma, by the way.
Okay.
When you tell them, go to Free Code Camp, look at the, you know, the computer language that you want. Is it Python? Is it whatever? You take it and, you know, and you concentrate on it. You get into cybersecurity. You get your certifications, and, you know, you get your LinkedIn and CVs. There are those ones I'm seeing. I know several. I started working with them in 2017, 2018, and right now they are self-employed. They are huge freelancers making good money, you know, on those freelance websites. So I do know their work. They are doing that. They are those ones who are they are saying, so you want to tell me I can just do a course for a year online for free, you know, get my certificates, or, you know, at minimo atumie kama 50K, get your certificates, and you get started into the job market. When they see that, most of them are like, okay, fine.
Okay. So they'd rather that instead, as opposed to going to university for 4 or 5 years.
That is what. So which means the universities also need to, you know, to change the way they are offering these courses. Some of these courses, when you look at the curriculum, it's probably unnecessary to have all the 4 years. I mean, and especially right now when things are so dynamic. Because by the time you are comp graduate, IT graduate is graduating, your kitu isha, we are on to the next.
Technology has already moved on to the next level.
Yeah, so I would say universities will have to rethink, have shorter courses, you know, those 1 year, 2 year courses that, you know, faster for those ones who don't want full, you know, degree. I don't know how they are going to call them. Though I do see in UK they offer very good masters for 1 year, so we should be able to do that even for our universities. I know they need to keep us there for us to pay the fees, but
what is the assessment of this situation, especially with the kind of apathy we see from people who should be in university but they're no longer interested in that?
Right, I think I would agree with Sarah to an extent. For a lot of them, they don't see the value in spending 4 or 5 years in uni. Pursuing a program they might not even in the first instance be interested in. They've probably been pushed there by their parents, you know, their school, because this is also big. I know of some high schools in Kenya that will force students to do some courses, especially STEM courses, you know, in sciences and technology and maths and engineering, because those courses are prestigious and they can then use that to place them in the papers and say, look at where all our students went, as a form of advertising. And I frown at that. I also agree that, you know, you don't find your footing really from a professional perspective until you're in your 30s, right? And that's why you see people, a lot of people. Sarah did what? You did what?
BSc, botany, biochemistry.
Are you practicing botany?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you are?
Hydroponics,
okay.
Yes.
You know, I mean, people did different things. Fred, I know you're not practicing what you studied in college. Maybe you use it at times.
It's still
part of your research.
Line,
yes. I'm not. I did a science course. Now I'm a humanities guy. So it is only in your 30s that you truly realize what your calling is, or you find your footing professionally. For example, I think I mentioned that I work for a business school, based in South Africa called Stellenbosch Business School. And we have an MBA where for you to get in, most of the cohort have to have about 10, 15 years experience. Of course, in the program brochures, we'll talk about 3 to 5 years. But because of the level of applicants, you find these guys in their 40s. They have figured out, this is what I want to do next. I want to be employed until 50, go into consultancy, or I want to be employed until 55. By then, probably pursue my PhD, go into academia and research at that age, where I can, hold a corporate job. So it is only then that you start finding, and you find that a lot of them by that point, you're not going to change your career in your 40s, right? So when you do a program in your 40s or in your late 30s, you are doing that program to either impact on the world, right? You're no longer chasing money by that point because your life is set. You have your ducks in a row in terms of what you want to do. So it's either changing, you're doing something for the community, or you're doing it to improve your skills, your life skills and all that, and thinking beyond retirement. Because the moment you clock 40, you start thinking retirement. Yeah. And what do I do at 55? What will I be doing? So it's important that even as we, like I said, so I am now putting the spotlight on our local unis, right? To make sure that whatever programs they're doing are future-proofing the students. Yeah. So you're providing future-proof. So it's not a matter of just doing a program so that they have their master's certificate, okay? And I frown upon the idea of, unless you want to pursue academia, so where you do your bachelor's, then quickly follow it up with a master's, probably without even a break, then go for PhD. I'm all for that. But if you want to go into professional practice, become a professional, go into the corporate world, become a consultant, it is too early to do your master's immediately after your bachelor's. I always advise guys, take a moment, take a deep breath.
Find out.
Yes, go out there, do different things and find out.
Do you think that is the role there for your first degree, your undergrad, is not necessarily to prepare you for that job that you'll eventually do, is to open up your mind to the possibilities that exist. Yeah. And then after that, once you figure out after this university process that, yes, I think this is my line, then you go back and master.
Correct, yeah.
But when they refuse or stay away from universities from the onset because this degree will not help me for the job that I want to do. Yeah. Don't you think that's missing the point?
Maybe not, Fred, because things have changed now. For example, you're able to get into a lot of MBA programs, Sarah, without a degree, without a first degree, as long as you have about maybe 10, 15 years experience. A lot of guys in Kenya that I know have done their MBA with a CPAK. So with your CPAK qualification, which makes you a chartered accountant, you don't need a bachelor's degree. From there, you probably need to do a small module, all right? And then get onto the MBA or the MSc Finance or whatever. And you have a lot of those programs in Kenya. I think in Kenya, we have more than 50 MBA programs. Yes. So you really have a lot of openings, okay? Even without necessarily doing your bachelor's. And I don't necessarily, by the way, I hold a different view because people were alarmed at the number of kids that chose to stay away from the undergraduate. It's smart. It's not a bad thing because it allows you, for example, to start your career a bit earlier, to make the mistakes in your early 20s when you're still accommodated by your folks. Your late teens, because maybe those guys finished high school at 18. So from 19, 20, maybe it allows you to work in the family business. If maybe you're lucky enough that your parents own a business, you can go there, work there, and discover your skill set. Because if they own a business, it's probably a small business, likely, where you're the accountant, you're the shop, you're the salesperson, you're the guy who does the supply chain and the orders and everything, you're the admin. So at the end of that cycle, you get to know where your strengths are. And that is where I give kudos to Kenyans of Asian descent, okay? So a lot of Kenyans of Asian descent will, after their kids finish high school, either high school or uni, will bring them into the business, whether they have done an MBA. And because a lot of them are affluent, they'll do even MBAs, the most prestigious MBAs on the planet. When they finish, they go back to their small family shop or their small manufacturing or cottage industry and hone their skills there. Then because they are probably better educated than their parents, and understand financing, they understand acquisitions, they understand having PE funds coming, they attract investment and blow that company out of.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the government is not really worried about them not joining universities. In fact, I posed this question to one member of parliament, and he said that probably the idea is to actually push these people who are not going to universities, despite the fact that they are qualified, towards vocational training, TVETs. And this administration promised to have a TVET in each and every one of the constituencies, 290 constituencies. But it comes back to the issue of curriculum, that, and you've seen the implementation. It's possible to have brick and mortar, but if at all you don't have the proper resources, even in terms of the training personnel, then even the TVETs may not really work. What we are seeing with the CBC at the national level could be the same scenario in the TVETs. So do you really think that that promise by the Kenya Kwanza administration to have TVETs across the country could actually be beneficial in the short term?
It could be beneficial only if, as you have said, we have the right trainers. We have to have the right trainers. Otherwise, what are we, what are we imparting? Then another thing, I like what you have said about the Asian community, and also there's this community in Nigeria called Igbo. They have that apprenticeship. It is a huge thing, and that is why they have. That was what has made them a very formidable force in that country, such that sio kusoma tu, not just theory, you are taken up. And so even us, people of our generation, we must purpose to give apprenticeship to, to Gen Z and the younger ones. We have to do that. We have to take someone, and the Gen Z, you have to accept that, it takes a few years for you to just, get the discipline of work. Yes, you can go and start your business, but discipline of work is so very important. I have been, more or less self-employed since I graduated, but I had to take one whole year and work in industrial area in very harsh conditions. But from that, I got the discipline of work that I needed for me to get into the entrepreneurship.
What would you say about the level of interns or attachis or those in pupillage that we are seeing right now in the year 2023? Because they are the youth we are talking about.
Yes.
And for them to actually get that discipline you're talking about in the job market, what would you say? What is your assessment of this Gen Z?
They're entitled. They are extremely entitled, and I have to tell you that entitlement will not get you anywhere. Truly, invest your 20s in getting that discipline of work. Be humble by the way. Hata ukiona mzae hapo, anajua there are things they know, yeah? There are things the older people know, and when you sit back long enough, you are going to learn something. So I urge them to be disciplined. They are not disciplined at all. They're entitled. They're just like, oh my God, yeah, sijiski, it's giving oppression.
Okay. We've had devolution now for about 10 years. And with this spreading out of TVETs and everything, would really depend on the kind of devolved services, devolved resources for these people to get jobs. But we are seeing the reverse. Young people still want to come to the city, still want to go to come to Nairobi because that's where the jobs are. Right. What's the disconnect? Because devolution was supposed to increase opportunities also at the county level.
So again, Fred, a couple of factors here. Devolution by and large has been a good thing for this country. I think if you go out of Nairobi, you'll see that the smaller towns, they have some life to them, yeah? And I'm hoping that, as we go, because we are only 10 years in, so as we progress down that path, as we go further along, that we start seeing even a reflection of that in the employment opportunities. Of course, the counties will also have to think outside the box. I don't know whether the box still exists, but they'll have to be very creative. And the problem with us is that our solutions to any problem are always procurement driven, right? So if we talk about youth unemployment, the governors will think, we need to make a huge market, which we call an industrial zone. Because that huge market will be constructed with 200 million and there'll be a good kickback. Really? You know, we go back to that mindset.
Yeah.
If you came up with because I don't see the problem with the governor from maybe one of the more productive, agriculturally speaking, counties. Jetting out of the country, after all, they jet out every time. And
Most of them are attending Munga now.
Yes, and they go and negotiate directly with the smaller countries. You're not going to get any leverage in the US or China or India now. Go to smaller countries in Eastern Europe. Go to the likes of Serbia, right? Go to Bosnia. Go to Hungary in Central Europe. Czech Republic. Go to Austria. The smaller countries that have not been exploited. And talk to them. Talk to their supermarkets, all right? Or the conglomerates that supply supermarkets, supply them direct from your county. Once you have that, you have that agreement or the framework in mind, look for investors. Tell them, look, we're going to export directly to Budapest in Hungary, or to Vienna in Austria, or to Belgrade in Serbia. And to get our produce, we need a small airport. And we need, what we'll do, this airport, come build it, you'll put a toll on the gate, 200 shillings, that will be your money, you'll give the county 10% or 15% as administrative. Get guys who own airlines, tell them now, we need an air that will fly from here, direct to Eldoret International Airport for export. So that produce, because the nature of agricultural produce is that it has a very short, shelf life. So you need to fly it out, to Eldoret and then out again. So you've got to have very strategic thinkers taking care of business at the county. If you were to put that supply chain into place, do you know how many people you employ? Right? Not directly, because you're not in the business of doing business as a county. You facilitate. So you've brought all these investors, then you make the industrial park, and then people rent it out, and they can give rent to the county. Alternatively, you have an investor come and put the park, you lease them the land, all right? But because we want to put up a big, ultra-modern thing, a very big thing that will cost 1 billion, so the governor can pocket 20%. You see, that's where our problem starts there. Okay. But also, secondly, in terms of the implementation, again, we spoke of policy. The implementation, remember, devolution was to start, it was to be cascaded incrementally. So we started with things like agriculture. Agriculture is now fully devolved. Education, of course, is not. And education is a strategic, it's so strategic, I don't think we can afford to devolve it yet. It needs to remain at the national level. But the TVETs and all those things, those are devolved things, right? The governors, of course, also have their bursaries that they can use them, and they can say, governors can come up with a framework and say, for example, I am not going to sponsor any student to do law. We have enough lawyers. There is an avalanche of lawyers in my county. They are not even getting enough employment. We have enough engineers. But I am going to orient this bursary towards agricultural courses. All right? I'm going to orient the bursaries towards guys admitted in TVETs. So if you have an admission to do an artisan course, to do plumbing, to do welding, to do mechanical apprenticeship, then I'm going to fund that. So you don't directly tell people you cannot do law. You just create impediments to doing law and push them and give incentives to do the vocational skill-based courses. If you did that, then you're going to allow more guys to do that. And by the way, you remember when I spoke earlier, this guy who does welding, Fred, could do an artisan course in welding, do a diploma in welding, have 10 years experience, and there's something called RPL, which Kenyan universities need to implement, recognition of prior learning. That is basically converting your experience, okay, and assuming that experience constitutes a number of years in university. So they can then go and do a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering in a year or two.
So we come back to university degrees.
Yes. So by the time he's doing the BSc engineering, this guy is an accomplished engineer. He understands the practical part, wants to underpin that with a theoretical degree. He's unstoppable. That guy could work anywhere in the world. He's competent. He's competent from a theory angle. He's competent from a practical lens.
Okay.
Yeah.
And because of time, final words on this, Sarah?
Overall, I would say that me as as one who is looking at the futuristic, I would say it is very important that for all the institutions, from a personal level, as parents, it doesn't matter how old you are, you have to understand what is going on in tech. I'm not saying you know everything, but at least on the surface you should know. When people say, because when you think about it, career advice, the first career advice that you got was from your parent. Yeah? And right now it is very, very important that we try to find a way of guiding our kids in these careers. So we have to understand what is going on in the world. You can say, mi sitaki maneno ya TikTok, sijui nisikia nini. No. You can actually regulate the algorithm so that it only brings you what you need by following the right hashtags, and all that. So as a parent, it's very, very important you be conversant with all these social medias that are going on. It is also important to know for the rest of the youth, just make sure that every day you are learning something. I know the memes are there and you can keep scrolling, but if you purpose that, yes, you don't have a job or anything, but you can, for example, you can say, fine, I want to be good at cybersecurity. You go to YouTube and find a course on that, and purpose to stick to that course for at least 3 months, and then go to something called GitHub and create your portfolio. No one can argue with your portfolio. That is your experience. That is what we are talking, the experience. With that portfolio, you can knock doors. You can actually say, yes, I can do this. I can make this website, or I can make this app, or I can do these things. So we are going to, in this information age, this one is being called information age. In the information age, you have to take personal initiative, personal responsibility. You can no longer just wait to be spoon-fed. Okay. Go out of your way and learn things that are out there, because the information is so much. Oh my God, wow. The information that is there for free, you guys, come on.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
It is, yes.
Alex, anything to add very briefly?
Very briefly, I just want to address myself to Kenyan parents. Kenyan parents need to know that the role of mentoring their children falls squarely on their shoulders. They have to be mentors to their children. They have to mentor them in terms of even their professional undertaking. They need to stop forcing them to do certain programs because they are prestigious and because it makes the parent feel good about themselves. This is not about you. It's about your child. Take them where they fit. Stop trying to fix a round peg in a square hole. The second piece of advice, again to Kenyan parents, right, is, and again, like Sarah says, there's now an information overload out there. Your kids have these gadgets, and they're getting them at a very young age or early age. Find them, help them find a constructive hobby. If they are on the phone, let them be on the phone playing chess, doing Monopoly, things that are going to help them. And to help that, if you own a small business, run a small business, from when they are 10, let them work in that business. Help them understand money from when they are young. Because when you understand money when you're young, you become unstoppable.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah Kahio, Career Advisor in Emerging Technologies, and Alex Njiri, Education Expert, for your very well-considered opinions on this issue of youth and unemployment. It is a conversation that will definitely continue because it would appear we are at crisis level with more than 55% of Kenyan youth who make up the larger population in Kenya currently unemployed, and the number is rising. How can we reverse this trend? Thank you so much, our panelists, for this. And you'll allow me to read this editorial commentary as we come to the end of this session. Now, education is undeniably the cornerstone of nation building and societal growth. A well-educated population not only drives economic development, but also shapes the cultural and social fabric of our nation. However, there are serious concerns over some recent government actions, which, though well-intended, have ended up causing widespread confusion in the education sector. This lack of clarity now threatens to disenfranchise a huge population of learners going through the system. One glaring issue is implementation of the competence-based curriculum, which has been marked by knee-jerk policy pronouncements. Such hasty decisions have created widespread confusion among educators, students, and parents alike. The result is that the first lot of grade 7 learners is now more like guinea pigs in a low-budget experiment. Did we rush to implement the new curriculum without proper guidelines? Another area of concern is a new funding model for university education and whether or not it could end up widening the inequality gap. While the government has attempted to explain why this new system is the best in its eyes, it is imperative that it guarantees a level playing field for all students. Concerns that only those from affluent families could potentially end up pursuing marketable degree courses should be addressed conclusively. Further clarity is required on the system of categorizing students for eligibility for university funding. The hope is that the new system is free from potential misuse or abuse for political gain.